Alexander Pope as a critic of Shakespeare. Alexander Pope as a critic was greatly influenced by the neoclassical French critics. He found fault with Shakespeare's dramas. Pope says that Shakespeare's tragedies are full of strange, unexpected, unnatural events and incidents. He found in the dramas verbose and bombastic expression. Even his comedies were full of unmannerly jests, mean buffoonery, and vile rivalry. In fine, he discovered wrong choice of subject, a wrong conduct of the incidents, false thought, and forced expression on the part of Shakespeare. But Pope was liberal in outlook. Like Dryden, he tried to clear Shakespeare from the imputation of many charges which were not his. Some of the charges were leveled against Shakespeare because of prejudice against him. For example, Pope says that the people who say Shakespeare never blotted a line are at fault, as Pope discovered that Shakespeare entirely Shakespeare entirely new writ Merry Wives of Windsor and extremely improved Henry V. Such examples are numerous. This mirrors that Shakespeare was not a careless writer as held by Ben Jonson and others. Pope says that some of the defects in Shakespeare were not because of lack of learning on his part. Pope hold Shakespeare as a well-read man. He proves it by the accurate description of the ancient history in his dramas. In the words of Pope, we find him knowing the customs, rites, and manners of antiquity. Shakespeare copied from Plutarch and Cicero. Even the manners of other nations in general have been drawn with equal propriety by Shakespeare. It is not only true about history. Pope says, whatever object of nature or branch of science he either speaks of or describes it as always with competence. His descriptions are still exact. Thus, it is proved by Pope that Shakespeare had not less and Latin and a small Greek. Pope says that some of the charges about wrong conduct of the incidents, false thought, and forced expression were true, no doubt, but these defects were not the product of his lack of learning. On the contrary, they were the product of the nature of the people of that time. Pope says that Shakespeare wrote to procure his subsistence. So he tried to cater to the taste of the then public, as his success as a dramatist depended upon common suffrage. That is why Shakespeare presented the scene of tradesmen and mechanics. He represented vulgar traditions and superstitions of the then public. Besides, Shakespeare was an actor apart from being a dramatist. He devoted himself to those things which suited on actor, which suited an actor on the stage. He ignored the rules of the ancients. In the words of Pope, most of our author's faults are less to be ascribed to his wrong judgment as a poet than to be his right judgment as a player. But the neoclassical French critics condemned Shakespeare on the basis of the rules of the ancients. Pope dissented from them and asserted to judge Shakespeare by Aristotle's rules is like trying a man by the laws of our country who acted under those of another. Unlike the neoclassical French critics, Pope was not blind to the beauties of Shakespeare. He said, if ever any author deserved the name of an original, it was Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not an imitator of nature. He did not borrow his images from books like Homer. Nature was in his heart. He looked inward and described her. That is why it is not just to say that he speaks from her, as that nature speaks through him. His characters are not copies of nature. In the words of Pope, his characters are nature herself. No two characters of Shakespeare are alike, just as two men are not alike in the world. Pope says that Shakespeare was a great master of human passions. He raised